"Dad, don't drink from that cup. The new mom added poison." The father was left in shock by his daughter's words and decided to switch the cups. The sharp winter air cut through as Michael Smith left his office building. In the gray cloud of his breath hid sad thoughts he tried not to show. The soft light of the street lamps illuminated his path to the parked car. The snow crunched under his feet, and every movement in that winter landscape reminded him that it had been 4 years since his life changed forever. In the car, Michael took out his phone and dialed Miss Brown's number, his daughter Stacy's nanny. The soft but expressive tone of the rings was interrupted by her calm voice. "Good evening, Mr. Smith," she said. "Good evening, Miss Brown. How's my little one?" Michael asked with a slight smile on his lips. In response, there were laughs and joyful shouts from his daughter. As if by magic, that voice managed to dispel for a moment the darkness that enveloped his soul. "I'll be home soon," Michael replied and hung up the call. On his way home, he stopped at a florist shop. Unusually for him, he chose a bouquet of red roses, each arranged with special care. These flowers were the symbol that the memory of his wife, Emma, would always be with him. When he arrived at the cemetery, his heart beat faster. The sky was gray, and the wind howled as if saying goodbye to those who were no longer there. Michael walked slowly toward Emma's grave, who died during the birth of their second child. He couldn't shake off the constant feeling of guilt. On the cold stone was her name engraved, and beside the inscription, he left the fresh bouquet. "I miss you so much, my love," he said through tears. "And Stacy needs a mother. I can't stop blaming myself for not being able to prevent all this." His voice was almost a whisper, and each sentence sounded like an unfinished lament. He stayed by the grave, seeking solace in those words carved in stone, but found only emptiness. After spending some time at the cemetery, Michael headed home. As he opened the door, he was greeted by Stacy, who ran to hug him with a shout of joy. "Daddy's home!" she exclaimed, embracing him, unable to contain her happiness. Michael lifted her in his arms and spun her in the air as he used to do with her mother. His eyes filled with tears of happiness and pain at the same time. "How are you, my princess?" he asked with a smile. "Jenny, the nanny, and I built a castle out of blocks," she responded, taking his hand and leading him to the children's room. In the children's room, where the walls were decorated with colorful drawings, Stacy proudly showed off her castle. Michael knelt to see it, and his heart filled with warmth. That night, they spent time together playing and talking. For dinner, they had baked chicken and salad prepared by Miss Brown. After dinner, Michael read to Stacy before bed. The little one fell asleep quickly, and he, hugging her, ran his hand through her hair and said softly, "Mommy loves you, little one." The night was stormy for Michael. He stayed awake in bed, unable to sleep, his thoughts returning to the past. Every moment he spent with Emma seemed as vivid as if it had been yesterday. He remembered her laughter, her touch, and how she cared for both of them. The morning began as usual. Michael Smith woke up early, before dawn, as was his custom. He needed time to prepare for the new day, and while Stacy slept, he enjoyed a cup of hot coffee sitting at the kitchen table. His thoughts wandered between the previous night and the upcoming work meeting. The coffee tasted as warm and comforting as the pleasant evenings he had spent with Emma. He left the house, lifting his briefcase with documents, and on the way to the office, he stopped by his car. Looking at the gray sky, he remembered how in the past, days like that didn't cause him concern. Now every morning was filled with expectation and anxiety. When Michael entered the office, he was greeted by his secretary, Miss Clark, a woman in an elegant suit and her hair tied up, always stylish and professional. "Good morning, Mr. Smith," she said, smiling. "Good morning, Miss Clark," Michael replied, looking at her. "How are you today?" "Everything's in order, thank you. Just a reminder that you have a meeting with the partners at noon. I've prepared all the documents and sent them to you by email," she said, handing him a folder with papers. "Thanks," Michael responded briefly, accepting the documents. He entered his office and began reviewing the materials. The documents were well organized, but Michael's attention was not only on the numbers and proposals. He thought about how to close the deal under the best conditions for his company. At the scheduled time, he headed to his lawyer's law firm, Mr. Harper. The office was in the city center, and although he had been there often, He felt nervous before the meeting. "Good afternoon, Mr. Smith," greeted his lawyer, extending his hand. "How are you?" "Good afternoon, Mr. Harper. All's well, thank you." "I hope you're well too," Michael replied, shaking his hand. "Yes, all good. Please, let's discuss your case," said Harper, pointing to the chair in front of his desk. "I've reviewed your partner's proposals. Let's begin with the key points." They sat at the table and Harper started breaking down the details of the proposal. Michael listened attentively, following every word. "As you can see, Mr. Smith, the partners are proposing an increase in percentages. They believe this will help strengthen the collaboration," explained Harper, pointing to a chart in the documents. "However, I think your proposal is already quite fair and favorable. Increasing the percentages will entail greater risks and costs." "I agree," Michael nodded, "but I want the agreement to be beneficial for both parties. We can't afford significant losses under the current conditions. Do you think we should offer another compromise? Perhaps we could offer them a small bonus or additional long-term conditions to compensate for that percentage increase. But keep in mind that every step requires careful analysis," said Harper, leaning over the documents. "And most importantly, you'll need to properly justify your proposal," Michael reflected, considering the possible options. Suddenly, the office door opened, and the lawyer's assistant entered with some additional documents. "Excuse the interruption, but here are some additional details we need to discuss," she said, handing the files to Harper. "Thank you," Harper replied, flipping through the papers. While the lawyer continued reviewing the documents, Michael thought about the upcoming meeting. He knew he would have to convince the partners of the convenience of the proposal, and every word, every phrase mattered. Confidence and precision were essential. "Do you think, Mr. Harper, it would be wise to offer them something additional, like a bonus, to get them to accept our conditions?" Michael asked. "Yes, that could work," responded Harper, taking notes. Michael nodded, pondering the idea. He knew every step had to be meticulously planned to avoid losing the opportunity to close the deal successfully. "Perfect. If everything is in order, I'll be able to show them that our proposal is fair and beneficial," he said, standing up from the table. "Very well. I'll prepare all the necessary documents and make the adjustments," assured Harper. "I'm sure you'll succeed." When Michael left the office, he felt relieved. The confidence that he was preparing as best as possible for the meeting gave him strength. He knew he had a tough day ahead, but now he had more clarity on how to handle the negotiations. At the office, Michael immersed himself in work, preparing for the meeting. He discussed the details of the proposal with his colleagues and prepared his presentation. Time passed quickly, and the tension increased. Lunchtime arrived, and Michael headed to the restaurant where he would meet with the partners. The restaurant chosen for the occasion was known for its cozy atmosphere and impeccable service. Soft background music created a relaxing atmosphere. Michael noticed that the partners had already arrived and occupied a table in the corner of the room. Mr. Johnson, with whom he would discuss the terms of the agreement, was seated, and next to him was his assistant, Laura. As Michael approached the table, Mr. Johnson stood up and extended his hand. "Good afternoon, Mr. Smith. Glad to see you. I hope we can discuss our proposal constructively." "Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson," Michael replied, shaking his hand. "Thank you for taking the time. I hope our proposal is satisfactory." They sat at the table, and Michael noticed that Laura, a young woman of about 25 with dark hair and expressive eyes, didn't take her eyes off him. It was a bit unsettling, but Michael tried not to pay too much attention. Shortly after, the waiter brought the menus, and despite the surroundings, the conversation returned to the central topic. "I've reviewed your proposal, and overall, I like it," said Mr. Johnson, examining the documents Michael had brought. "But I'd like to discuss the possibility of increasing the percentage. This is crucial for us." "Mr. Johnson," began Michael, trying to remain calm, "I understand your desire, but I can't accept such an increase. We need to cover the company's costs and at the same time have at least a small profit margin. We've already made the proposal quite favorable." Laura, sitting beside him, continued to observe Michael attentively with a focused and analytical gaze. She seemed to be waiting for the outcome of the conversation. "I understand your point of view," responded Mr. Johnson, not taking his eyes off the document, "but I wouldn't want you to draw hasty conclusions. I need time to think it all over. Agreed, Michael nodded. You have a week. I'm sure you'll find the best solution. If you're not satisfied with my proposal, I'll be forced to present it to other potential partners. Mr. Johnson smiled, and his smile hid a certain cunning. I'm sure we'll reach an agreement, he said. I'll try to contact you as soon as possible. When they began to leave, Laura stood up, and as Michael headed to the exit, she approached him. With a gentle gesture, she extended a business card. Mr. Smith, if you need additional consultations or help, don't hesitate to call me, she said with a warm smile. Thank you, Laura, Michael replied, taking the card. I'll keep that in mind. He felt her gaze linger on him a bit longer than normal, but he tried not to give it importance and headed to the exit. He knew the meeting hadn't gone exactly as he had hoped, but perhaps it was just the first stage of negotiations. When Michael returned to his office, he couldn't stop thinking about Laura's business card. She had left him with a feeling of uncertainty. Although he preferred not to pay attention to it, he focused on preparing the next step. At night, when the office was already empty, Michael reviewed the documents again and reflected on the proposal. Time was pressing, and he needed to act quickly. Perhaps they could reach an agreement, but he had to be well prepared for the next meeting. His thoughts returned again and again to Laura and her gaze. It was professional and friendly, but something in her behavior unsettled him. Could it be a sign of something more? He tried to set those thoughts aside and focus on his main objective. Michael Smith arrived home late at night. The clock was nearing 11, and after a hectic day, his body felt the fatigue. He took off his coat, hung it up, and headed to the kitchen. The aroma of the dinner Miss Brown had prepared still lingered in the air. However, Michael wasn't hungry. He just wanted to relax and have some whiskey. With a nostalgic sigh, he poured himself a full glass, and sitting at the table, he turned on the television. The nightly news didn't manage to distract him from the worry and tension related to the negotiations. As he reached out to grab the remote, his hand brushed against Laura's business card that she had given him at the meeting. Michael remained motionless for a moment, looking at her name written on the card. He sighed and, without thinking too much, decided to dial her number. The phone rang once, then he heard a female voice. Good evening. Laura, it's Michael Smith. Sorry to bother you at this hour, but I'd like to talk to you about... On the other end of the line, a light laugh was heard. Michael, good evening. I recognized your voice. Don't worry, it's not that late. How can I help you? I wanted to know how your day went, he replied, trying to maintain an informal tone. Oh, there's been a lot of work, Laura replied. But Mr. Johnson is going on a trip for a few days, so it'll be a bit quieter. And you? Quite tense, admitted Michael. Lots of documents and preparation for the next steps. However, I'd like to spend tomorrow evening in a more pleasant environment. May I invite you to dinner tomorrow? Sounds wonderful, responded Laura with a warm intonation. I accept. Where and when? Let me think about it, said Michael, scrolling through the list of restaurants on his phone. How about La Bella Villa at 8 p.m.? It's a place known for its cozy atmosphere. Sounds perfect. I'll be there, replied Laura with a note of joy. I'll wait for your message with the address and time. Sure, I'll send you the details. Thanks for your time, Laura. Have a good night. Good night to you too, Michael said goodbye. When Michael hung up, he felt his heart begin to beat faster. He finished his whiskey and headed to the bedroom. His thoughts were occupied by the meeting that awaited him and how the evening with Laura would go. The morning began with cheerful chaos. Michael was still asleep when his little daughter, Stacy, burst into his bedroom. She jumped on the bed, radiating energy and joy. Dad, it's time to wake up, she shouted, hugging him. Michael rubbed his sleepy eyes and replied, Good morning, princess. He hugged her and kissed the top of her head. Why are you up so early? The nanny promised we'd go on a picnic in the park today, said Stacy excitedly as she continued jumping on the bed. I can't wait. Well, since you're so eager, let's start the day with breakfast. Michael got up and stretched, feeling his body wake up. We also want to enjoy this day. After a quick breakfast, Stacy and her nanny, Miss Brown, headed to the park with a bag of sandwiches and a picnic basket. Michael was glad his daughter was spending the day outdoors. He himself went to the office to finish some important matters. In his office, despite the usual work environment, Michael's thoughts were far from the documents. He sat at his desk reviewing a stack of papers, but all his attention was on the dinner he had scheduled with Laura. He couldn't shake off the excitement and anticipation. So he decided to make a small gesture of courtesy. He sent her a bouquet of flowers through a messenger, hoping to brighten her day. When the flowers arrived at Laura's office, she immediately sent Michael a message. "The flowers are magnificent. Thank you." Seeing her response, Michael felt his mood improve instantly. He smiled and returned to work. But then Nicholas, his best friend and head of the marketing department, entered his office. "Wow, seems like someone's having changes in their life, huh?" said Nicholas, smiling upon seeing the cheerful expression on Michael's face. "Flowers are something new." "How do you know?" Michael asked, surprised, getting up from his desk. "How did you realize I sent flowers?" "Friend, I know you, Pito," Nicholas laughed. "Who's the mysterious lady?" "Laura. She's Mr. Johnson's assistant," explained Michael, unable to hide a smile. "Oh, so someone from outside the office?" Nicholas asked, squinting, with a mischievous smile. "I thought we had new employees I wasn't aware of." "No, nothing like that," Michael replied. "We just met at a business meeting, and that's all." "Doesn't seem like just a business meeting," observed Nicholas, winking. "Have you invited her out yet?" "Yes, we have dinner tonight," admitted Michael without hiding his excitement. "I hope everything goes well." "Well, of course. You'll tell me all the details," said Nicholas, patting him on the shoulder. "I promise I will," Michael laughed. "Now I have to concentrate on work." When Nicholas left, Michael tried to resume his tasks, but his thoughts kept returning to the appointment that awaited him. Every time he looked at the clock, his impatience grew. No matter how much he tried to focus on work, his thoughts always returned to the date that awaited him. When finally the workday ended, Michael returned home to prepare for the dinner. He took a shower, chose one of his best suits, and got ready. With each passing minute, he felt more nervous. The time until the date seemed to stretch endlessly. After getting ready, he decided to check the information about the restaurant and confirm that everything was going as planned. Everything had to be perfect. With that thought, he left home and headed to La Bella Villa, where he would meet Laura. Upon arriving at the restaurant, he realized he had arrived a little early. That gave him time to calm down a bit and check his reflection in the entryway mirror. He tried not to overthink how everything would go, but couldn't avoid feeling nervous and excited. When Laura entered the restaurant, her appearance drew all eyes. She wore an elegant black dress that highlighted her refined beauty. Michael stood up to greet her, and upon seeing her smile, he felt his heart beat faster. "Laura, you look spectacular," said Michael, kissing her hand as a greeting. "Thank you, Michael," she replied, her eyes shining with joy. "I'm glad we could meet. You look very elegant, too." They sat at the table and began to look over the menu. Michael ordered a bottle of wine and then suggested, "What do you think if we start the night with something light?" "I think it's the perfect way to relax and chat." "That's an excellent idea," agreed Laura. "I love trying new things." During dinner, they talked about everything. Laura told him about her passions, her love for art and travel. Michael, for his part, shared his impressions from his recent trips and some interesting stories from his life. He especially loved talking about his daughter, Stacy. "Stacy is my little joy," said Michael when the conversation focused on his family. "She always finds a way to brighten my day. We often go to the park or have picnics. She loves spending time outdoors." "She must be very sweet," commented Laura, her eyes full of warmth. "I've always wanted to be a mother. It must be incredibly rewarding to see your child grow and develop." Michael, somewhat embarrassed but moved by her words, continued, "Yes, it's a true blessing, but it hasn't always been easy. Stacy and I have gone through many difficulties after her mother's death. I've tried to be her support and pillar." Laura placed her hand over his with a soft and comforting touch. "Oh, I'm so sorry you've had to go through that," she said with sincere compassion. "I can only imagine how hard it must have been for both of you. But you're doing a great job, and it shows." Michael felt his heart lighten a bit with her words. Laura's gaze was full of understanding and empathy, which gave him a special sense of comfort. "Thank you," he replied somewhat hesitantly. "It means a lot to me to hear that. I really try to do my best for Stacy." As the night progressed, their conversations became more intimate. They talked about their dreams, fears, and hopes. Laura shared her own experiences and how important it was for her to find time for herself. Sometimes I feel like so much is happening in life that I lose myself, she confessed. But when I find a moment to rest, everything falls back into place. Michael felt he shared her feelings. I know what you mean. Sometimes I also need to stop and enjoy the moment. It's nights like this that help me recharge and feel more positive. After dinner, Michael offered to take Laura home. They left the restaurant and he noticed how fresh and pleasant the night air was. They headed toward the car, and the ride to Laura's home became another opportunity to converse. I want to tell you that tonight has been very special for me, Michael said when they arrived at her destination. I love spending time with you. She looked at him, her eyes shining under the soft light of the street lamps. I loved it too, Michael, she replied with a voice full of sweetness. I felt very comfortable with you. As they said goodbye, Michael slowly approached her, and unable to resist, he kissed her softly. Laura responded to his kiss, and that moment seemed eternal. They stayed embraced, and Michael felt his heart beat even faster. Good night, Laura, he said when they finally parted. Good night, Michael, she replied with a smile before disappearing into the darkness. Michael watched her as she walked away and felt his heart was full of emotions. He couldn't believe that this woman had so quickly won his affection and his heart. With that feeling, he headed home, already anticipating the next evening and the continuation of their relationship. Michael woke up early in the morning. Despite the previous night being full of emotions, Stacy, as always, was the first to wake him. Dad, wake up! Her voice pulled him from sleep as he opened his eyes and saw her smiling face. Today we're going to the park again. Good morning, Princess, said Michael, getting up and hugging her. Yes, we'll go to the park, but first we have to have breakfast. Stacy was joyfully hopping around the room while Michael prepared breakfast. The time he spent with his daughter always brought him joy and tranquility. Today was a special day, and he felt that something important awaited him. After breakfast, when he and Stacy were ready, Michael took Laura's business card from his pocket, which had her work email address written on it. He decided to write her a brief message to see how her day had gone. Hello, Laura, the message began. How was your day? I hope everything is well. The response came a few minutes later. Hello, Michael. My day was quite busy, but everything's fine. And you? Michael didn't delay in responding. Stacy and I are going to the park. Laura replied quickly. That sounds wonderful. Have a great time. By mid-afternoon, Michael and Stacy arrived at the park. It was beautiful, full of greenery and flowers, the perfect place for a walk. As usual, Stacy quickly lost herself in her play, and Michael took that time to think about Laura. In the evening, Michael and his daughter returned home. Stacy was full of excitement after spending the day with her dad, so she fell asleep quickly. Several weeks had passed since the day Michael and Laura spent their first night together. Their relationship was developing rapidly and excitingly. Each day brought new emotions and events, and Michael and Laura increasingly found more time to enjoy each other's company. One day after work, Michael and Laura met at a small, cozy restaurant they hadn't yet visited. It was known for its unique menu and intimate atmosphere. Hi, Michael. Laura approached the table where he was already waiting. She wore an elegant dress that highlighted her grace. Sorry I'm late. There was a bit of traffic. No worries, Michael replied, standing up to kiss her. I'm glad to see you. How was your day? I spent all day at work, but tonight is worth waiting for, said Laura, sitting at the table. I have some news I want to tell you. Oh, what news? Michael asked, pouring wine into the glasses. Today they offered me something more interesting, said Laura with a joyful smile. I'll now be working on more important projects. That's wonderful, said Michael, hugging her. You deserve it. I'm very proud of you. The conversation quickly shifted to future plans, and they decided to visit an exhibition of contemporary art that would open the following week. Michael noticed how Laura lit up when talking about art and how much she enjoyed discussing the details. Tell me, Michael, asked Laura while enjoying dessert, have you ever thought about doing something different from your work? Yes, I've thought about it, Michael replied, reflecting. Sometimes I feel like I need something new, something fresh. But for now, my work occupies most of my life. And you? Yes, I've always dreamed of having my own little cafe, said Laura, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. I think it would be amazing to work in a place that brings warmth and joy to people. That sounds wonderful, said Michael, and I'm sure you'd achieve it. You're always full of energy and ideas. In the following weeks, their relationship continued to deepen. They often organized romantic dinners, went to the movies, and visited exhibitions. One of those nights, they visited an art exhibition where Laura was fascinated by the works. Look at this painting, Michael, she said, pointing to a vibrant canvas. It's simply captivating. I feel like every brushstroke tells its own story. Yes, I see it, Michael replied, observing the painting. I like how you see things in art that I might overlook. I think it's partly because I've always tried to find depth in everything I do, said Laura, her gaze full of warmth. That helps me understand people better. You really have a knack for seeing beyond, commented Michael, and that's one of the reasons I love spending time with you. The following week, Michael and Laura met again for dinner at a new restaurant. They talked about their plans for the weekend and decided to spend time at Michael's country house. What do you think of the idea? Michael asked while they dined. I think it would be the perfect place to relax and unwind. Sounds great, replied Laura. I've always dreamed of spending time in nature. It's an excellent idea. When they arrived at the country house, Laura was delighted by its warmth and beauty. Michael, this is simply beautiful, she said as she walked through the garden. It's so peaceful and serene here. I'm glad you like it, said Michael, hugging her. This place helps me relax and forget about work. At night, sitting by the fireplace with cups of tea, they talked about everything that concerned them and shared their most intimate thoughts. Laura began to tell him about her childhood and how she had always dreamed of a great future. My parents always supported me in everything I did, said Laura. They were my main inspiration. And how was your childhood? I grew up in a small family, Michael replied. My parents were also very involved, but I always felt I had to strive harder to make them proud. That's wonderful, said Laura. I love how you talk about your family. It shows how much you value relationships and your loved ones. They spent several days at the country house, enjoying the tranquility and rest. The time they spent together only strengthened their feelings for each other. At the end of the week, as they returned to the city, Michael felt their bond becoming even stronger. The next time they met, Michael and Laura talked about their future plans and dreams. Michael suggested, "What do you think about meeting my daughter?" Laura's eyes shone with joy, and she replied, "That's an excellent idea. I like thinking about a future together. Let's plan how to do it." Their plans continued to develop, and each day brought them more joy and satisfaction. Michael was sure their relationship was just beginning to blossom, and he was ready to walk toward a future full of new opportunities and happiness alongside Laura. The morning began as always with a loving wake-up and morning coffee. Michael and Laura were sitting at the table in his apartment, talking about their plans for the day. Laura, with a smile, was setting the cups and plates as she prepared breakfast. "Michael, remember I have the meeting with my boss today?" she asked tenderly while finishing preparing the coffee. "Of course, darling," Michael replied, hugging her from behind and kissing her neck. "You look amazing." "Thank you," said Laura. "I'm a bit nervous. It's an important meeting." "Don't worry. Everything will go well. You've prepared perfectly," said Michael, pouring coffee into the cups. "In any case, I'm here for you." After breakfast, Michael drove Laura to her office, and they spent a few minutes talking about their plans for the evening. "I'm leaving work early today," said Michael. "We can have dinner at that new place you told me about." "Sounds great," replied Laura, her eyes shining with happiness. "I'm looking forward to it." When Laura entered her office, Michael headed to work to prepare for the meeting with Mr. Johnson. On his desk were the latest documents he needed to review. He carefully went through them. When his assistant Rachel entered, "Michael, do you have everything ready for the meeting?" she asked, peeking into the office. "Yes, Rachel, everything's ready," Michael replied, closing the folder. "I think everything will go smoothly." "Don't worry," said Rachel. "I'm sure everything will go very well." At the appointed time, Michael headed to Mr. Johnson's office. On the way, he thought about how important it was to finalize this project to free up more time for Laura. Inside, he was filled with determination. When Michael entered Mr. Johnson's office, he saw him sitting at his desk, reviewing documents. Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson, began Michael, extending his hand. Ready for the meeting? Good afternoon, Mr. Smith, Mr. Johnson replied, shaking Michael's hand. Let's get to the topic. They sat at the table and Michael opened the folder with the documents. Mr. Johnson read them carefully and looked at Michael. Well, Mr. Smith, I agree with the terms, said Mr. Johnson, signing the documents. Everything looks very professional. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson, said Michael, feeling relieved. This is an important step for us. When Michael, satisfied with the meeting's results, began to gather his things, he noticed that Laura had entered the office. She was accompanied by a colleague. Hi, she said, approaching Michael. How did the meeting go? Everything went perfectly, Michael replied, smiling. We reached an agreement. It's a big step for us. That's wonderful, she said with a radiant smile. I'm glad everything went so well. Yes, me too, Michael replied, feeling his heart speed up. Let's celebrate tonight. With pleasure, said Laura, her eyes shining with joy. I can't wait to spend time with you. After saying goodbye, Laura and Michael went their separate ways. Michael was filled with positive emotions from the successful meeting, and the anticipation of the evening with Laura excited him even more. Upon arriving home, Michael thought about how to spend the evening. He called Laura to confirm their plans. Hello, Michael, Laura answered the phone. You're home already? Hi, yes, I just got home, said Michael. How was your day? All good, she replied. See you at 7 p.m.? Yes, perfect. I'll be ready, said Michael, unable to hide his joy. Great, said Laura. See you tonight. When they met at the restaurant, Michael was delighted to see Laura. He was ready to celebrate the meeting's success and enjoy their time together. Hi, he said, hugging her. You look stunning. Thank you, replied Laura, her eyes bright. I'm happy to be here with you. They spent the evening at the restaurant, talking about all they felt and enjoying the delicious food. Every moment they spent together was full of emotions and joy, and Michael realized these feelings would only continue to grow. At the end of the night, as they said goodbye, Laura touched his hand, and their gazes met. Michael felt their connection becoming even stronger and looked forward to what the future would bring them together. Thank you for a wonderful evening, said Laura, her voice full of warmth and sincerity. Thank you, Michael replied, kissing her softly on the lips. It was incredible. When Laura disappeared into the darkness, Michael stood on the street, feeling his heart beat faster and faster. A month had passed since Michael and Laura started dating. Their relationship was becoming more serious, and Michael felt it was time to introduce Laura to his daughter, Stacy. This idea made him uneasy, but he knew it was an important step for their future. On Saturday after lunch, Michael and Laura headed home. Stacy was at home playing with her toys and waiting for her dad to return. When they entered, the joyful laughter of the little girl filled the house. Dad! Shouted Stacy, running toward Michael. You're back! Hello, my princess, Michael hugged her. I have something important for you. Stacy saw Laura and observed her curiously. And who is that lady? She asked with interest, squinting her eyes. This is Laura, Michael smiled. I'd like you two to meet. Laura, noticing how important first impressions were for Stacy, knelt to be at her level. In her hands, she held a large, soft doll. Hello, Stacy, she said, extending it to her. This is for you. I hope you like it. Stacy, surprised and excited, took the doll. Her eyes shone with joy. Thank you, Aunt Laura, she exclaimed. Can she talk? No, she can't talk, Laura replied with a smile, but she'll always listen to you and be with you to hear your stories. Is she going to live with us? Stacy asked anxiously, looking at her dad. Michael smiled gently, looking at his daughter. First, let's get to know each other, he said. You can show Laura your room and your toys. Stacy eagerly pulled Laura along. Come on, I'll show you, she said, leading her to her room. I have lots of toys, and I love playing with them. When they entered the room, Stacy began showing her toys, telling her about each one. Laura listened attentively and joined in the play, asking questions with genuine interest. This is my favorite teddy bear, said Stacy, showing Laura her stuffed bear. I always take him with me when I go to sleep. He's very cute, observed Laura. Do you sleep with him every night? Yes, Stacy nodded. And this is a car that can go really fast. Do you want me to show you? Sure, Laura replied, smiling. I'd love to see it. They spent several hours in the room, playing with the toys and telling stories. Stacy showed Laura all her favorite things, and soon they began to laugh together. After playing, they sat down for dinner. Michael prepared a light meal, and the three were in a good mood at the table. "Dad, does Aunt Laura cook as well as you?" Stacy asked while tasting the food. "Yes, she does," Michael replied. "I'll cook something delicious for you very soon," said Laura, raising her glass. "This afternoon has been wonderful." After dinner, Michael walked Laura to the door. Before she left, Stacy pulled her dad aside. "Dad," she said with some concern and displeasure, "is Laura going to be my new mom?" Michael leaned down and hugged his daughter. "Stacy," he began gently, "I know this might be a bit confusing, but Laura and I want you to be happy. We're going to spend a lot of time together, and I'm sure she'll be a great friend to you." "Do you like her?" Stacy asked doubtfully, looking at her dad. "Very much," Michael replied. "Laura is wonderful, and I think she'll be an incredible part of our lives." "Well," Stacy nodded, her face still reflecting some uncertainty, "I'll try to be friends with her." "That's all I can ask," said Michael, hugging his daughter. "I'm sure everything will go well." Laura, standing at the door, saw the conversation with a warm smile and approached them. "Stacy," she said, "I'm glad to have met you. I hope we can spend a lot more time together." "I like meeting you too," Stacy replied, her expression becoming friendlier. "Can we play with the toys when you come back?" "Of course," promised Laura. "I'm looking forward to seeing you again." When Laura left, Michael hugged his daughter and thanked her for receiving Laura so openly. He knew that meeting a new family member could be complicated, but he was sure that over time, their bond would strengthen. With that thought, he spent the night hoping for the best for his little family. A few weeks passed since Laura moved into Michael's house. This transition wasn't easy, but both of them tried to make everything as smooth as possible. Laura quickly adapted to her new role in the family, and her relationship with Stacy became an important and positive aspect of their life together. One Saturday, Michael returned home after a long day at work and heard joyful laughter coming from Stacy's room. He approached the door, and looking inside, he saw Laura and Stacy playing a board game. Laura wore a colorful dress, and her hair was tied up in a comfortable bun. She was genuinely enjoying the time she spent with the girl. "Dad, look, I won!" shouted Stacy excitedly, holding a game piece. "Very good," praised Laura. "You're the best at playing." "We've been playing for an hour," commented Stacy. "Laura plays very well." Michael entered the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "Hello," he said, smiling. "You're champions." "We just finished the game, and now we're going to read a book," Laura responded, looking at Michael. "Excellent," said Michael, approaching and kissing Laura. "I see everything is going wonderfully." "Dad, Laura said that this weekend we could go to the zoo," said Stacy, looking at Michael with enthusiasm. "Yes, that's true," confirmed Laura. "We want to spend some time outdoors." "Sounds perfect," said Michael, hugging Laura. "I admire you, Laura. You've managed to connect with my daughter. I see how happy she is when you spend time together." Laura blushed slightly and smiled. "Thank you, Michael," she said softly. "It's very important to me that Stacy is happy. I also feel part of your family." At night, after Stacy fell asleep, Michael and Laura were having dinner in the kitchen. Laura, who had prepared a delicious dish, served it to Michael with a proud expression. "I put a lot of effort into this," she said as she placed the plate in front of Michael. "I hope you like it." "It looks excellent," said Michael, tasting the food. "And it tastes wonderful, too." "I'm glad you think so," said Laura, smiling. "I'm trying to make our life as comfortable and joyful as possible." "You're doing a great job," he praised Laura. "It's a pleasure to see how you care for us. It gives me confidence knowing we made the right decision." "We're achieving it together," said Laura. "That's very important to me." "Yes, you're right," agreed Michael as he continued eating. After dinner, they sat in the living room talking about their plans for the weekend. Michael felt that his life had gained new meaning and joy with Laura's arrival. The time they spent together, her attention to detail, and her effort to create a cozy home had become key aspects of their relationship. "What do you think?" Michael asked. "What else do we need to create the perfect atmosphere at home?" "I think we already have everything we need," Laura replied. but maybe we could add more family traditions to make our weekends even more special. Good idea, said Michael. We could start with something simple, like watching a movie each week or having family dinners on weekends. I love that idea, replied Laura. It'll be a great opportunity to spend time together and create new memories. After several weeks of living together, Michael and Laura felt their relationship growing stronger. They created their own traditions, planned for the future, and enjoyed every moment shared. Michael was grateful that Laura had become part of his life, bringing joy and harmony to his home. A few months passed, their life became fuller, and each day brought them more joy and satisfaction. With each passing day, they were more certain they had found the right person. Their evening walks, shared dinners, and celebrations strengthened their bond. One Friday night, Michael decided it was time to take the next step in their relationship. He planned to make a proposal that would change their lives. To do this, he chose a special place, a cozy restaurant with a spectacular view of the city. Laura knew nothing of Michael's plans. She thought it was just another night that they would spend together at the restaurant. However, Michael wanted this moment to be unique. He chose the nicest table with city views, ordered her favorite dish, and made sure the night was as romantic as possible. When they arrived at the restaurant, Laura was delighted with the atmosphere. Between the candles and the soft light of the lamps in the cozy place, she felt like she was in a fairy tale. "This place is amazing, Michael," exclaimed Laura when they entered. "You've really gone all out." "I wanted this night to be special," Michael replied, taking her hand and guiding her to the table by the window. "You deserve something truly beautiful." They sat at the table and began talking about plans for the weekend. When the waiter brought a bottle of wine and some carefully decorated menus, Michael chose the perfect moment to raise a glass and toast. "Laura," he said, looking into her eyes, "I want to make a toast to us, to finding each other, to our love and our future." "To us," Laura responded, raising her glass. "You make my life incredible." After dinner, while enjoying dessert and a cup of coffee, Michael felt the moment had arrived. He stood up and approached Laura with a small velvet box in his hands. "Laura," he began, "in all the time we've spent together, I've come to understand how much you mean to me. You've brought so much joy and happiness into my life that I can't imagine it without you." Laura looked at him surprised, and her eyes filled with tears of joy. "Michael, are you serious?" she asked, trying to hide her emotion. Michael opened the little box, revealing a beautiful diamond ring. "Laura, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want you to be my wife. Will you marry me and be with me forever?" Laura froze in surprise as tears ran down her cheeks. She couldn't find words to express how she felt. "Michael, this is simply incredible," she murmured, unable to believe what she was seeing. "So what do you say?" Michael asked softly, awaiting her response. "Yes, yes, I accept," exclaimed Laura, extending her hand to receive the ring. Michael gently slipped the ring onto Laura's finger, and they embraced. In that moment, everything around them became insignificant. The only thing that mattered was being together. "I'm so happy, Michael," said Laura, hugging him. "It's the best proposal I could have imagined." "I'm happy too," Michael replied, kissing her. "I wanted this moment to be perfect, and I'm glad it was." After leaving the restaurant, Michael suggested to Laura a walk along the boardwalk to celebrate their engagement. Under the night sky illuminated by the city's lights, they walked hand in hand, enjoying the moment. "We must tell Stacy," suggested Laura. "I'm sure she'll be happy to hear the news." "Of course," agreed Michael. "I also want her to know. It'll be an important moment for our entire family." Upon arriving home, they gathered with Stacy and told her about the engagement. Stacy, as expected, was delighted. "Dad! Laura!" she exclaimed with joy. "This is so exciting. I always dreamed of having a mom, and now it's a reality." "We're happy too," said Michael, hugging his daughter. "I hope this makes our family even happier." Laura hugged Stacy and promised that they would spend many happy moments together. They began planning the wedding, choosing a date, and discussing the details. It was a time of anticipation, but also of preparation for a new life full of hope and happiness. Planning the wedding turned out to be more exciting than they expected. Michael and Laura chose the wedding dress together, the invitations, and the decorations. Each day they delved deeper into the preparations, giving special meaning to every aspect of their wedding. Finally, the wedding day arrived. Michael and Laura chose a cozy hotel in the countryside for the ceremony. The entire day was filled with excitement and joy. Stacy was thrilled to be part of the day, and her smile was present in every photograph. When the ceremony began, Michael waited at the altar in an elegant suit that fit him perfectly. He was nervous, but happiness shone in his eyes. When Laura entered the hall in her magnificent wedding dress, Michael couldn't take his eyes off her. She was stunning. The ceremony was emotional and full of feelings. The vows they made were sincere and profound. At the moment of exchanging rings, Michael and Laura felt their hearts united forever. When it was time to say the words husband and wife, Michael and Laura embraced and kissed. The wedding guests applauded with joy and offered their congratulations. At that moment, it seemed the world stood still, and they could enjoy that unique moment. After the ceremony, there was a banquet filled with fun, dancing, and laughter. Michael and Laura felt their life was just beginning. They enjoyed every moment of that special day, aware they had taken a step toward new and happy days. At the end of the night, when all the guests had left, Michael and Laura stood by the window, looking at the stars. "I'm so happy we have each other," said Michael, hugging Laura. "Me too," she replied, kissing him. "We achieved this together." They looked at the night sky, knowing their future was just beginning, and they were ready to live new adventures together. In that moment, they knew that with their love and mutual support, their life would be filled with joy and happiness. After the wonderful wedding, Michael, Laura, and Stacy decided to spend the honeymoon as a trio. Although this decision might seem unusual for newlyweds, it was motivated by how important Stacy was to Michael, who wanted her to be part of their first vacation together as a family. Laura fully supported this decision, understanding what it meant for Michael to include his daughter in his new life. The trip was carefully planned, and they chose a picturesque place on the coast where there would be a tranquil environment and many activities for the whole family. When they arrived at the resort, Stacy was excited by what she saw. The sunlight, the golden sand, and the blue sea impressed her greatly. Michael and Laura made an effort to make the vacation especially memorable for her. "Dad, look! We can build a sandcastle there!" exclaimed Stacy, pointing to the beach toys near their room. "Yes, Princess," Michael replied, hugging her. "We can spend all day at the beach, and you can choose what we'll do." "What if we first play in the sand and then go swimming?" Stacy suggested, her eyes shining with joy. "Sounds like a plan," agreed Laura, taking the initiative. "First, let's have a sandcastle building competition. I'm sure we can all be masters." After that, they spent the morning on the beach, building castles and collecting shells. Laura and Michael helped Stacy create a castle adorned with colorful shells and sticks. "This is a real royal castle," praised Laura when they finished. "Thank you, Laura," Stacy responded cheerfully. "You're a true queen of sandcastles." After the beach, they decided to tour the surroundings. Michael and Laura chose a family tour that included a boat ride and a visit to local landmarks. When they boarded the boat, Stacy couldn't hide her excitement. "This feels like an adventure from the stories," she said, looking with interest at the scenery. "I hope you both like it," said Michael, looking at Laura. "This should be a great addition to our vacation." As the boat set sail, Laura and Michael enjoyed the views and atmosphere. They sat together, embraced, talking about how they had managed to make this vacation special. "I'm so happy we did this together," said Laura, looking at Michael. "It's truly wonderful." "I am too," Michael replied, hugging her. "Stacy is happy, and that's the main thing. We can continue creating beautiful memories together." After the boat ride, they returned to the hotel and organized an evening picnic on the beach. Michael prepared a basket with food, and Laura decorated the place with candles and soft blankets. "It's so romantic," observed Laura, looking at the beautiful decoration. "We could make this a tradition." "Yes, it's a great idea," agreed Michael, opening a bottle of wine and pouring it into glasses. "It feels so peaceful and cozy here." Stacy began to enjoy dinner, and then, after eating together, they took a walk along the beach to enjoy the sunset. "Dad, I love the beach," exclaimed Stacy, running on the sand. "It's the best place in the world." "I'm glad you like it," said Michael, walking alongside her and Laura. "We want you to always remember this vacation as something special." We're really creating incredible memories, added Laura, hugging Michael. As night fell, Michael and Laura put Stacy to bed and sat on the hotel's terrace, discussing the day and enjoying the stars. This vacation has been simply amazing, said Laura, looking at the night sky. I'll never forget these moments. Me neither, agreed Michael, taking her hand. And I hope we have many more days like this. They continued talking under the starry sky, making each moment important and memorable. It was their first honeymoon as a family, and they were happy to spend it together, creating new and valuable memories. When the vacation came to an end, Michael, Laura, and Stacy returned home, but the feeling of happiness and satisfaction remained with them. This honeymoon marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, full of love and shared adventures. Michael immediately immersed himself in work, focusing on developing a new project that was crucial for the company. During that time, Laura, who had recently told Michael about her decision to resign, also showed strange behavior that Michael preferred to ignore, thinking it was related to her move and adaptation to her new life. One day when Michael was away for work, Stacy accidentally overheard a phone conversation. She hid behind the door, trying not to make noise, but her fear and anxiety grew. Don't worry, Laura was saying, holding a small vial in her hands. I already have the poison. Tonight I'll pour it into the tea, and Michael will be disabled forever, and we will take over his company. Stacy couldn't believe what she was hearing. She covered her mouth with her hands to keep from screaming and paid attention to every word. Her heart beat faster. When Laura left the kitchen, Stacy was paralyzed, trying to process what she had heard. Dad, whispered Stacy, approaching Michael, who had just returned home and was happy to see his daughter. Don't drink from that cup. The new mom put poison in it. Michael was stunned by her words. He was sure Stacy couldn't be wrong. However, his intuition told him he should verify what she said. He immediately switched the cups, and when Laura returned to the kitchen, she didn't notice anything suspicious. I can't wait to drink this tea, commented Laura, acting as if nothing had happened. I hope it relaxes me after such a hard day. She drank the tea in small sips, watching Michael. Soon her face flushed and she began to panic. I feel awful, said Laura, breathing with difficulty. I don't feel well. Laura fell to the floor. Her body began to shake. Michael quickly called an ambulance, and when the paramedics arrived, they took Laura to the hospital. Stacy hugged Michael with trembling hands. He held her tightly. Princess, how did you know the tea was poisoned? Michael asked, confused, while they were at the hospital. I heard her say she'd put poison in the tea to make you disabled, and then they'd take over your company, Stacy replied with a trembling voice. I didn't want anything to happen to you. The next morning, Michael entered Laura's hospital room. She was in bed with a pale face, and he felt a storm of emotions inside him. He looked at her with fury and distrust. Why are you doing this to me? He asked, his voice trembling with anger. How could you? Laura began to cry. Tears ran down her cheeks. Her gaze was full of remorse. Forgive me, Michael, she sobbed. I was manipulated. I didn't want this. Everything went wrong. At that moment, Nicholas, a friend of Michael, burst into the room. His face was distorted with anxiety and fear. And you, what are you doing here? Michael asked, his voice full of displeasure. What did you do? Nicholas swallowed nervously. His eyes were full of panic. She's expecting a child from me, he said. These words shocked Michael. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Why are you looking at me like that? Nicholas continued, his voice filled with despair. Yes, we've known each other for a long time, and I was the one who proposed doing this whole show of eternal love. Only that poisoned tea. You were supposed to drink it. But why? Michael was stunned. His hands trembled. We were friends. Friends? Nicholas laughed through tears. I loved Emma, but she chose you. And then I wanted to show you what it feels like when your beloved woman is taken by your best friend. No, friend, you don't love anyone. You only care about money. Michael looked at Nicholas with hatred. His voice turned cold. I don't believe you. You just wanted revenge and money. Michael slowly left the room. His thoughts were in complete chaos. He felt his world had crumbled. Nicholas's words about Emma, about Laura, about the future child who could be part of this complicated story were like a dagger. Michael immediately called his lawyer to discuss the divorce. His heart was closed forever, and his feelings were shattered. When Michael returned home, he felt his life had changed forever. Only the shadow of betrayal and the pain he had experienced remained in his memory. Now he had to rebuild his life, facing the consequences of what had happened. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Your support helps us continue creating stories, and your feedback is important for us to understand if you're enjoying our content. We appreciate every one of you, and we can't wait to share more with you soon.